What's up, guys? How's it going? So, we're going to talk about the airstrikes that were carried out by the U.S. in Syria over the last few days. So, basically, two fighter jets dropped seven precision guided munitions on buildings used by the Iranian backed militias in Abu Kamal. So, these missiles destroyed nine buildings and killed 22 people. And at the time, they're saying that these were calculated and they were defensive, and that they think most of the people they killed were fighters, militia fighters, but they also are not sure. And there's human rights groups, so the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, have claimed that there were more than likely casualties, but they don't know how many, and they're not sure how many militia fighters were killed and how many of them were casualties. So 22 were killed, and we're not sure how many were fighters and how many were casualties. But more than likely, it's probably half and half. But these came in response to three rocket attacks that came in 1 week, and these were against U.S.-led coalition bases in northern Iraq. So a lot of them came against this town in northern Iraq of Erbil. So there was rocket attacks in this region from Iran, from Iranian-backed militias, and the U.S. strikes were carried out here on the eastern borders of Syria, and this here in the region of Abu Kamal. So this region is a known hub for Iraqi Syrian/Syrian Shiite militias. So the Iraqi Shiite militias kind of use this border with Syria as a way to kind of funnel into the region if they want a stronghold for when they kind of do incursions into Iraq, or when they need to kind of fall back. They can use this region as kind of a Shiite power base, because Syria is kind of known for having a strong Shiite population. So they a lot of times are willing to back Shiite militias, and Iran, obviously being the Shiite power base in the region, it is the main backer of Shiite militias. So you have Saudi Arabia, who is essentially the main Sunni Muslim power base in the region, and then you have Iran, who is the Shiite power base in the region. And these two forces have always kind of been at odds with each other, looking to kind of expand their influence over the periphery regions, be it Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Yemen, whatever the kind of place they're looking to expand their religious or geopolitical influence. So the war that's happening, or that has been happening for the past few decades or centuries, or however you want to go back, because this conflict really has been raging since the birth of these divisions in Islam between the Shiites and the Sunnis. So understanding that conflict will help you better understand the conflict happening in the Middle East. But to understand what's happening with the U.S., you really just need to understand that the U.S. is backing Saudi Arabia and looking to kind of protect their Sunni allies in the region, and Saudi Arabia is backing Iraq in order to try to kind of protect the Sunni power base they have there. But there's a lot of Shiite support by Shiite groups that have kind of maintained their power base through support from Iran and through support with Syria. So along the kind of western and eastern borders, you're able to have a lot of small pockets of Shiite resistance towards the kind of more powerful Sunni-backed militias that are controlling Iraq, or that are fighting for control of Iraq, depending on how you want to look at it. But all of these kind of players are just constantly in flux and fighting for control over these periphery regions, particularly Iraq. So you have a war basically constantly raging between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Syria, but it's a proxy war where they're backing militia groups within Iraq to try to expand their influence, right? So this region of Abu Kamal is kind of this region in Syria where a lot of the Shiite militias will be backed and kind of back their kind of incursions into western Iraq. So what you need to understand, though, is that these bombings were not necessarily even a bombing against the militia itself. In almost, you know, many senses, these bombings were just warnings. They were messages. These were intentional attacks to send a message from Biden to Iran saying, look, I'm not going to take your expansion. Because what happens is when you have like a new president or a new kind of, you know, regime coming in, a new political party or whatever, they might have different leanings. They might look at situations differently. So a power base or you know, a military power might try to expand or might try to test this new regime by saying, hey, we're going to try and do, you know, incursions into this region where you guys have had power base before. Maybe if they don't, you know, protect it or defend it, we can then push further. And that's kind of what the U.S. are claiming, right? Is they're like, we are acting in defensive. We were acting as defensive. These were calibrated, calling it proportionate and defensive actions that were, you know, in retaliation to aggressive rocket attacks on U.S. targets in neighboring Iraq, right? So that's the U.S. position. And the Syrian government obviously has condemned the attacks. They've called it cowardly U.S. aggression, and they have claimed that these strikes violate international law and will lead to consequences that will escalate the situation in the region, the foreign ministry has said. And the Russian government basically has said that they were only given 4 or 5 minutes warning of the strike and had no real forewarning. So they have also claimed that these were illegal actions, and you know, Biden has also defended that, saying these were legal actions. We have the right to defend against illegal actions or against aggressive actions in the region against our forces, which is what they claim that was. And however you want to look at it, take your pick. I just, to me, I kind of condemn both actions. Both actions were wrong. Both the bombings from Iran on the Erbil base against U.S.-led coalitions in the region, and these U.S. attacks on Abu Kamal. At the end of the day, like when you're launching drone strikes or fighter jet strikes, airstrikes, you're not, you know, you're bombing indiscriminately and you're killing everyone. The bombs can't tell the difference between, you know, a child and a militia fighter, and a lot of times they're kind of all intertwined as one because they're living as, you know, families in these regions. So you got to consider that a lot of the times. And when you're just dropping bombs to kill 22 people and destroying 9 buildings, it's, I don't know, I just can't see that as necessarily being justified no matter how you look at it. But that's kind of the way warfare has become and how it's evolved, kind of this games without frontiers, right? That Peter Gabriel line. But one of the things I think is you got to look at kind of the bigger picture, and one of the things you should understand is that Saudi Arabia is kind of the biggest receiver of U.S. military aid in the region, but they're also the biggest lobbying group in Washington, and they're spending billions of dollars every year to lobby Washington to better position themselves to receive U.S. aid or to kind of foster better interest towards Saudi Arabian objectives in Washington. And you know, here it says Saudi Arabia has thus far only committed to purchase $14.5 billion worth of equipment since the announcement was made 17 months ago. The administration says the Saudis are currently pursuing more than $114 billion in military hardware. So this is the other thing, right? Is that the biggest receivers of military aid in the region is Saudi Arabia, and they're also the biggest purchaser of U.S. military equipment. So this is one of the reasons why there's such a strong relationship between the government and Saudi Arabia, between the U.S. government and Saudi Arabia, right? And this is why you need to be kind of wary when you see U.S.-backed aggression and expansion in the region, because a lot of times it is coming as a result of pressure from these lobbying groups. So the Council on Foreign Relations and organizations like the Project for the New American Century and a lot of these government think tanks and large nonprofit or government organizations, intelligence operations that push forth kind of Western-backed ideals and prerogatives. They're basically a lot of times looking to defend and expand Western hegemony throughout the regions, and this leads towards their kind of want to expand into these neighboring regions and allow for kind of Saudi Arabia and Israel to kind of have a more aggressive stance and try to actually expand their influence to control or to limit the influence of the Shiite militias and the kind of Iranian authorities, because they're obviously the anti-thesis towards the U.S.-backed coalitions in the region. Is, you know, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel. These groupings are all allies in the Sunni kind of U.S.-backed Western coalition, whereas Iran, Syria, and this obviously the Shiite militias in Iraq are all backed and allied with Russia, China, and kind of this Eastern alliance, or you could say even like the BRICS. So even India as well. These countries that are kind of starting to rise and starting to dominate geopolitics in these regions, which are allowing them to kind of counterbalance the U.S. and Western, formerly British imperial domination in the region. So that's kind of what I wanted to say in this video, and what I wanted to go over with these airstrikes and what I think they mean. And I really think they're just a message. It's not really wasn't even really about the people there, which is sad, but these were a message towards Iraq, towards Iran and the Shiite backed militias in Iraq, but also to the Syrian government, that the U.S. is not going to, and especially the Biden administration is now not going to accept any further Shiite expansion into the region. And yeah, that's that. So we'll see where that goes, but that's going to be that for this video. And thanks for watching, guys. Feel free to like and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think, and let me know what you guys think of these airstrikes and whether you think they were justified or not. And we'll see what happens from this. But like I said, I don't think it's going to happen. I think this is just going to be kind of a tit for tat, a little bit of saber rattling. There were strikes from Iran on the U.S. base in northern Iraq and Erbil, and now there's been U.S. strikes against the Syrian-backed Shiite militias. So, well, I should say Iranian-backed Syrian Shiite militias that are also acting in Iraq as well. So that's going to be that. Like I said, I think this is more just a message and kind of a tit for tat. They tried to show aggression. The U.S. showed that they weren't going to accept it, and they were going to retaliate to any form of Shiite aggression. So this kind of solidifies that Biden is stepping into that role of kind of the same role that I think Hillary Clinton would have taken, which is that kind of defense and that furthering of CFR and Trilateral Commission kind of ideologies towards the region, in which they want to see kind of more Sunni-backed Western kind of expansion, or at least hegemony, upheld in the region. So that's kind of what I think you're seeing and what I think you're going to see play out. But we'll see how that happens and how Iran reacts to this situation in Iraq and Syria, and we'll see. But it'll probably just end up being further proxy conflicts within Iraq between Shiite and Sunni militias. Yeah. So that's going to be that. Thanks for watching, guys, and feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll be back at you with another video. Have a good one. Bye-bye.